More than 60% of Russian tank losses are now blamed on small FPV drones. And in the messy gap between industrial war and backyard engineering, an 18-year-old in Kyiv has built a net-firing shotgun round that costs a few dollars and can bring down drones worth tens of thousands. Night after night, Russia launches hundreds of unmanned aircraft at Ukrainian cities and bases, turning the sky into a grinding attrition machine that forces defenders to choose between wasting million-dollar interceptors and letting cheap kamikazes through. The math is brutal. A single Patriot or AMRAAM launch can cost as much as a small drone fleet, so defenders are pushed to field lower-cost, improvised answers at the squad level. Into that calculus steps a teenager who learned to tinker on YouTube, printed parts on a home 3D printer, and turned a simple mechanical trick into a close-range countermeasure that frontline units now test in combat. This is not a quaint gadget story. It signals a deeper shift. When cheap, mass-produced drones and new fiber-optic guided models that cannot be jammed appear on the battlefield, centralized billion-dollar defense systems no longer hold the monopoly on solutions. Why does this matter? Because the next big change in warfare may not come from a national lab. It may come from a bedroom workshop that solves one brutal, immediate problem better, faster, and far cheaper than anything the official suppliers can field. Yuri, an 18-year-old from Kyiv's Shulyavka neighborhood, has transformed from a casual video game player into a frontline weapons builder whose creation now protects troops against deadly aerial threats. He grew up in a semi-industrial area, scarred by the war's opening chaos, where Ukrainian defenders held off enemy pushes near the local zoo and key roads in early 2022, turning quiet streets into zones of fierce resistance that shaped his view of survival. Schools shut down amid the blasts, leaving him restless and eager for impact, so he dove into online videos that taught basic mechanics and assembly skills, honing those lessons on a basic 3D printer tucked in his family's apartment. What started as idle tinkering during long nights of alerts evolved into focused work on tools that could turn the tide for soldiers facing constant overhead dangers. That drive led him to design a specialized shotgun cartridge packed with a tough polymer mesh lined with small metal weights, which deploys mid-flight like a spinning snare to wrap around spinning blades and send threats plummeting harmlessly. The setup relies on everyday materials for quick assembly, keeping each unit dirt cheap at under $5 while fitting standard 12-gauge firearms that units already carry, so no extra gear clogs up packs during patrols. Operators just aim ahead of the incoming buzz, fire once or twice, and watch the tangle do its job, often at distances from 30 to 50 meters where split-second choices matter most. This approach avoids the mess of shrapnel in tight spots, making it safer for teams hunkered in wooded lines or urban ruins. And early prototypes showed a success rate above 80% in controlled runs against mock targets, zipping at real speeds. Troops from the elite 3rd Assault Brigade, known for bold tech tactics like their summer 2025 drone-led capture of enemy positions without a single boot on ground, grabbed the idea after an initial pitch fell flat elsewhere due to red tape on explosives. They rushed samples to a secure range where handlers added live charges under strict oversight, then fired volleys at hovering stand-ins to check spread and drop patterns. Results stunned the evaluators. One test downed a full-sized recon model at 50 meters during a windy drill, while combat logs from the Kursk sector logged 2 attack types neutralized before they could dive on supply runs, sparing at least a squad from potential hits. The brigade snapped up 100 rounds right away, blending them into daily ops alongside their fleet of over 7,000 unmanned assets supplied that year. And word spread fast among other outfits craving simple counters to the sky's relentless hunters. Yuri pins his push on stark realities from the field, noting that unmanned strikes now trigger about 75% of injuries among ground forces, a figure backed by recent medic tallies showing spikes in wounds from low-flying scouts that spot and strike isolated groups. Those numbers hit home during his late-night builds, as reports trickled in of units losing half their strength to invisible predators that jam-proof cables make even tougher to spot. He shifted gears from a quieter blade concept that fizzled after feedback, channeling chats with gaming buddies versed in ballistics toward this mesh trap that empowers lone watchers to fight back without calling in heavy support. Balancing phone-based classes with base visits, he tweaks designs based on operator notes, like adding stabilizers to cut jams that once halted a demo and nearly cost a trainer's focus in the heat. Such shifts highlight how one young mind can bridge the gap between hobby circuits and real stakes, where every tangled fall means fewer medevacs racing under fire. His setup not only stretches limited ammo stocks but also boosts morale among riflemen who once felt exposed, turning passive weights into active stands that echo across scattered posts. As feedback loops tighten, with tweaks rolled out in days rather than months, tools like this promise to ease the grind on exhausted crews, offering a glimpse of how fresh ideas keep defenses sharp amid endless swarms. Since early 2023, clusters of hobbyist builders and tiny assembly spots have sprung up in underground cellars and campus corners across Ukraine, churning out unmanned scouts and countermeasures that hit enemy lines hard. These hidden hubs, often run by volunteers dodging power cuts and supply shortages, pull together scavenged parts from online orders and local scrap, letting teams crank out dozens of flying gadgets weekly without waiting on big suppliers. Owners seal off rooms with blackout curtains to evade scouts overhead, then wire up circuits under dim LEDs, testing bursts in back alleys to dodge electronic blocks that scramble signals. Such setups thrive on quick tweaks from user reports, turning flaws like weak batteries into strengths through shared online forums where coders swap fixes overnight. Alliance leaders have labeled this surge a real-world testbed for uneven combat styles, where underdogs flip power gaps using smarts over sheer might. Observers point to how scattered creators here outpace formal labs by blending off-shelf tech with field hacks, creating tools that pierce defenses in ways pricey gear often misses. This setup lets smaller outfits strike deep with minimal risk, forcing bigger foes to spread thin and rethink old plays. Reports from joint exercises show these methods boosting hit rates by 3 times in tight zones, as low-flying units slip past radars tuned for bulkier foes. The edge comes from constant cycles of build, test, adapt, where one group's snag becomes another's upgrade, shared via encrypted chats. Fresh coders and college kids now pour hours into scripting flight paths and printing custom shells, rolling out prototypes that spot hidden caches or jam incoming signals during live pushes. These newcomers, fresh from hackathons or side gigs in app design, team up with vets to debug code on the spot, ensuring swarms dodge traps that grounded earlier batches. Stats reveal over 20,000 trainees cycled through boot camps by mid-year, each group launching gear that logs 70% more intercepts than stock models, thanks to tweaks like auto-swerve routines pulled from gaming engines. Their hands-on trials in rough terrain yield data that feeds back into designs, slashing failure drops from 40 to under 10% in follow-up runs. Kyiv's leaders rolled out a dedicated hub called Brave One to back these shifts, offering legal nods, cash boosts, and safe zones for turning backyard builds into army-ready kits. This network links idea folks with testers and funders, speeding clearance for frontline drops while shielding creators from oversight snarls that bog down rivals. Grants flow to over 500 ventures yearly, with budgets hitting billions in local currency to fuel everything from signal shields to swarm coordinators. The platform's market spot lets buyers grab vetted items fast, using points earned in ops to snag upgrades without red tape delays. Early backers note how this stream cut rollout times from quarters to days, letting squads grab fresh counters mid-campaign and hold edges in fluid scraps. These moves signal a broader pivot where everyday tinkerers drive defense edges, pulling in foreign eyes eager for blueprints that stretch budgets thin. Pledges topped $100 million at key gatherings this fall, drawing backers who see scalable wins in setups that blend cheap runs with sharp software. Such flows could spark exports by year's end, letting allies kit up against similar skies without breaking banks. Yet the real win lies in morale lifts for crews who once braced for unseen dives, now spotting and swatting them with homegrown tricks that level odds. As cycles spin faster, this blend of grit and gear hints at defenses that evolve with threats, keeping paces even when numbers stack against.
With an army of volunteers supplying an estimated 90% of the country's military drones.
Brave One stands at the heart of Ukraine's push for affordable tools against unmanned threats, backing a lineup of gadgets that let regular troops fend off swarms without draining big budgets. This state-backed network, launched to bridge inventors and fighters, funnels grants worth over $100 million yearly into ventures that turn clever ideas into battlefield staples, covering everything from signal blockers to trap setters. Teams sift through hundreds of pitches monthly, picking winners for fast-track tests in secure zones where engineers fine-tune based on soldier input, ensuring items withstand mud, cold snaps, and heavy use. Over 500 projects have cleared hurdles since setup, with payouts hitting billions in local funds to ramp up output and keep edges sharp against foes who outspend but lag in agility. One key piece in this mix is the Mitla launcher from Tanita, a pocket-sized tube that hurls an expanding web to snag spinning rotors and halt scouts mid-dive. Units stash these in vests for quick draws during patrols, where a single pull and aim drops intruders without stray shards risking nearby allies, and logs show 85% takedowns in drills against models mimicking enemy patterns. Developers highlight its no-power setup as a win for remote posts, letting guards respond in seconds and stretch ammo stocks that otherwise burn fast on endless watches. Another standout backed by the cluster involves 5.45mm shattering loads for standard rifles, which burst aloft into 5 swift chunks that fan out like buckshot to clip fast movers before they strike. These rounds mimic everyday bullets in shape, but pack a custom core for wide scatter, boosting odds against zippy targets by 300% in range trials up to 165 feet. And they've earned official stamps for widespread issue with 1 clip per fighter. Squads load them alongside regular mags for seamless switches, turning basic firearms into sky guards that save crews from calling in costly backups, as medics report 20% fewer evacuations in equipped zones. The design skips gun tweaks entirely, fitting seamlessly into existing kits and cutting training to mere minutes for raw recruits facing daily buzzes. Rounding out the cheap defenses, the anti-drone pistol serves as a handheld disruptor that floods control bands with noise to scramble links and force crashes without a shot. Clocking in at 2.2 pounds with a 300-foot reach, it runs on batteries for portable sweeps around camps or convoys, blocking over 600 known signal types in seconds flat. Operators point and trigger like a flashlight during advances, with field data showing 70% halts on incoming waves that once pierced lines unchecked, and its light build lets medics or scouts carry extras without slowing marches. This jammer fills gaps where bullets miss, offering silent stops that preserve stealth in tense holds and buy time for heavier responses. Yuri eyes a tie-up with this outfit to scale his mesh shots into mass runs, locking in standards and checks that greenlight factory lines for thousands monthly. His bid taps their vetting paths to polish edges like misfire rates, aiming for frontline drops by winter that could equip whole brigades. Meanwhile, the group wrapped tests this fall on far-flying suicide flyers tough enough to slip past Russian signal walls, hitting marks beyond 40 kilometers to shred supply chains and radar nests. Over 10 squads demoed these in July drills, logging 90% strikes on mock hubs despite jams, and full rollout looms to carve kill zones that stall enemy builds. Such leaps could shift balances by 2026, letting defenders strike deep while foes scramble. But sustaining flows hinges on steady backer cash amid rising costs. Unmanned flyers now claim about 70% of frontline injuries in Ukraine's fight, mostly from quick-strike models that zoom in on supply paths and scattered patrols, turning open fields into deadly traps. These buzzing scouts, often guided by live feeds from afar, spot lone trucks or huddled squads from afar, then dive with payloads that shred gear and flesh alike, leaving medics overwhelmed by burns and shrapnel wounds that hit hardest in low cover. Recent tallies from aid groups show spikes in such hits during foggy dawns or dusk pushes, where poor sightlines let intruders slip close before alarms blare. Commanders note how these raids force constant halts on moves, as units hunker under nets or scatter to evade the hum that signals doom, and survival rates dip below 50% for exposed groups caught mid-haul. Short bursts from these agile attackers have racked up over 3,000 non-combatant hurts in border zones since early 2022, blending into daily life with tragic speed that strains local clinics and aid lines. Watchdog's verified peaks in late 2024 when strikes doubled monthly, hitting record marks by spring this year with 42 dead and hundreds maimed in one stretch alone. Such patterns push villages to empty out, as folks flee constant dread that turns errands into gambles, and responders scramble with limited bandages for wounds that linger long after the smoke clears. Moscow eyes cranking out 2 million close-in buzzers next year, paired with 30,000 far-off strikers and fake lures meant to wear down sky shields until they crack. Factories in remote spots hum nonstop, pulling in parts from abroad to flood fronts with waves that test limits daily, and planners bet on sheer volume to overwhelm grids already stretched thin. These dummies, cheap as dirt at a few grand each, mimic real ones to suck up interceptors like sponges, leaving gaps for heavy hitters to punch through unchecked. Early leaks suggest output could triple swarms by mid-season, forcing defenders to pick shots wisely amid barrages that light up nights and drain reserves faster than trucks can reload. Kyiv leans hard on these winged hitters as prime strikers, with think tanks pegging them at roughly 70% of verified enemy gear wrecks that scouts confirm. Swarms peel off from safe layers to tag fuel dumps or command posts, using group dives to saturate zones where radars strain to track every blip. Pilots tweak paths on the fly via apps that dodge known jam spots, landing payloads that gut convoys before crews react, and logs track over 1,400 hulks left smoking from such runs last season alone. Rough counts put 65% of foes' tracked wrecks down to these nimble air pests and pint-sized scouts that exploit weak tops. Heavies rumble forward only to eat dives from above, where thin plating crumbles under focused blasts that disable treads or ignite stores in heartbeats. Crews bail amid flames as second waves mop up stragglers, and yard markers show peaks in hull breaches from overhead pokes that outstrip side hits by wide margins. Fresh raids under the web spinner push targeted 4 deep enemy pads, chewing up 41 birds with blows pegged at $7 billion in scrap value. Blazes lit up distant fields as wings crumpled and fuselages split, grounding fleets that once darkened Ukrainian skies, and spotters tallied a third of long-haul carriers sidelined in the blitz.
Russia suffered truly significant losses, entirely justified and deserved.
Ukraine's stacked shield against sky assaults mixes signal scrambles, rapid-fire mounts, brainy towers, airborne hunters, and pocket protectors to blunt waves of incoming buzzers that probe deep. This setup layers tricks from far-off jams to up-close zaps, letting crews peel threats step by step before they land blows, and planners tweak mixes based on nightly patterns that shift with foe upgrades. Spotters feed data into hubs that queue responses in seconds, turning scattered posts into linked nets that catch 90% of slow movers like gerunds on good nights. The blend saves pricey shots for big risks, stretching thin stocks amid barrages that topped 700 in peak summer runs, and keeps fighters focused on ground holds without constant looks up. Signal warfare kicks off the block with setups that flood bands or fake guides to cut links and send intruders spinning off course. These rigs, dotted along fronts with over 300 Lithuanian-supplied sensors spotting 600 types from miles out, disrupt feeds that pilots rely on for dives, forcing many to loop back or ditch harmlessly. This layer shines against noisy Gerantus cruising at 112 miles per hour, but fiber-linked versions slip past, pushing crews to layer in kinetic backups for full stops. Quick-burst cannons and sky guns form the next wall, with donated rigs like Britain's Terrahawk Paladin blasting 30mm rounds up to 1.86 miles using smart fuses that pop near targets. Australia's 160 Slinger units track movers beyond half a mile with similar chains, while Slovakia's Wolf 25 AD rolls in on wheels, packing a 25mm Oerlikon that shreds Lancets from 5 miles via 360-degree radars. These mounts, deployed since June with positive ops feedback by August, chew through airburst shells to shield key spots, logging 80% hits in sector trials that spared convoys from swarm dives. Their mobility lets them shift with pushes, covering gaps where fixed posts fall short and easing loads on stretched crews. Smart Sky Sentinel posts stand as auto-watchers that scan, lock, and fire on their own after a quick human nod, handling speeds from 125 to 500 miles per hour against everything from recon flyers to cruise shots. Priced at $150,000 each with cheap belt-fed ammo, these spins cover full circles to guard towns or hot zones, and a fundraiser aims for 10 more by fall to bolster nights. Officers confirm 6 Shahhead drops in live ops, as built-in brains crunch paths round the clock without fatigue breaks, freeing hands for other tasks amid endless alerts. Choppers join the hunt by pairing sensor birds with armed twins that use FLIRIs to guide shots on heavy payloads up to 200 pounds. Crews scale this tactic after September reports of 40% takedowns in clear weather zones, turning rotors into sky sweepers that plug holes in ground nets. Pairs hover over sectors to spot and blast waves before they crest, with logs showing doubled intercepts in scaled runs that spare urban grids from blackouts. This air edge buys ground time, letting infantry push without full halts for overhead clears. Yuri embodies this youth spark in Ukraine's grind, juggling lessons with builds and drills in haze-filled camps run by assault teams. His path mirrors thousands who blend school with sparks that light defenses, drawing eyes from alliance powers keen on backyard tricks as blueprints for tomorrow's scraps. NATO briefs now pull these hacks into sims, with pledges to fund scales that could reshape Allied kits by 2026, turning grit into global shields against rising skies. Above Ukraine's drone-packed skies, one teen stands out, not as the only innovator, but as the boldest symbol of a generation forged in war's fire. Yuri, an 18-year-old from Kyiv, turned his gaming smarts and YouTube know-how into a dirt-cheap net-firing shotgun round that snags Russian drones mid-flight, saving soldiers from barrages that claim 70% of battlefield wounds. His bedroom workshop, armed with just a 3D printer, sparked a low-cost counter to threats costing tens of thousands, proving a single spark can shift a billion-dollar fight. Ukraine's government, through Brave One's funding and testing hub, teams up with small-scale creators to transform these brainwaves into real gear, fueling a wave of decentralized defense that outpaces slow industrial giants. From scattered labs, coders and students churn out jammers, kamikaze flyers, and AI turrets like Sky Sentinel, which zaps Shahheads without pause, while layered shields blend signal blocks, cannons, and choppers to guard against nightly swarms of up to 700. Yet Russia's 2 million drone plan for 2025 looms large, threatening to drown defenses in sheer numbers. Can lone geniuses like Yuri keep tipping the scales against factories? Will their hacks outsmart endless waves, or will cash en masse win out? The future's unclear, but this clash hints at warfare's next chapter, where brains might just beat brawn by 2030. Want more on this tech-fueled fight? Hit like, share, and join Military Force for the latest